In the early days, the Pope was the Bishop of Rome, who was seen as a father figure of the Church. This is usually thought to be because of the link with St. Peter. It is believed that Jesus appointed Peter as the rock on which the Church would be built. Peter is also believed to have been martyred in Rome. Although the papacy was not recognized until later centuries, Rome can still name the line of bishops back to the 1st century and to St. Peter as the first pope. Many of the popes that came in the first 3 centuries of the papacy are seen as obscure figures. During periods of persecution, some were martyred along with their followers, but many were involved in deep theological arguments with other bishops, and young church began to develop stronger and more concrete doctrines. The role of the pope came to change during the pontificate of Metellus, whose reign lasted for a brief 3-year period. In 313, Metellus held an open council in Rome at the command of the emperor. This marks the beginning of a lasting link between the papacy and governmental power. Prior to the building of churches, worship had mainly been practiced privately in houses, but the coming forth of new church buildings began to make concrete evidence of the new status that Christianity was beginning to have. This change soon became visible in Rome, which was the strongest Christian community. Although most churches in Rome were created as new structures, some developed from houses that were already in use for worship. One of the most famous examples is the Giovanni al Palo in Rome, which can be seen here. Following this, Constantine established 3 important churches in the city of Rome. One, which he intended to be the city's cathedral, was placed beside his Lateran palace. This cathedral, St. John Lateran, was intended to be home of the Pope. The other 2 churches that Constantine established in Rome were built in honor of Peter and Paul. In honor of Paul, as Paolo Fiore Le Mura was placed outside the city, St. Peter's was placed in the Vatican. The first pope to really take hold of the potential that the papacy could bring was Leo I, who held a staggering 21 years in office. He defined Catholic orthodoxy and began to assert the power of the pope's authority over other bishops and church heads. He did this by the power of the keys, which said, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. What you forbid on earth shall be forbidden in heaven, and what you allow on earth shall be allowed in heaven." This was granted by Jesus himself to Peter, and which was then passed down by Peter to his successors. As the collapse of the imperial power began in the Western Empire, as the Visigoths, Huns, and Vandals moved willingly through, Leo found himself in a place to take lead in temporal affairs. In 452, during Leo's pontificate, both Gaiseric the Vandal and Attila the Hun threatened Rome. He is accredited with convincing the 2 men that Rome should not be destroyed, and that they should turn back short of the city. Leo's actions are a precursor for a broader role of the papacy in governmental affairs in the centuries to come. Approximately 100 years later, Gregory I, through 2 major events, also took steps to enhance the role of the papacy. In 592, just 2 short years after he's elected pope, the Lombards are at the gates of Rome. Gregory accepted papal responsibility for the city and negotiated with the barbarians and was able to convince them to withdraw. 4 years after this event, in 596, he sent 40 monks as missionaries to England. Using missionaries to spread spiritual influence through Europe, Gregory is able to set in place the pattern for medieval papacy. The increasing value of the papacy is indicated by 2 major events. The first, in 644, was the acceptance and recognition of the authority of the papacy in England at the Synod of Whitby. The second was the development of alliances between Rome and the Carolingian rulers of the Frankish kingdoms. These 2 events were marked by the careers of 2 successful missionaries, Wilbrod and Boniface.